Welcome to Long Term. I'm Tai King, and along the journey and process of this podcast of learning from other individuals and the things that they've dealt with and how they overcame them. A lot of people you look at, you say, oh, they're so smart, they're well educated, well dressed, they've got a great career, and they must have never had any huge problems. They don't deal with the things that I've dealt with. They don't know what it's like to really struggle. Not true, not true whatsoever. And so until we start having these conversations and making it normal to be able to have these conversations and talk about that, um, we'll never really, we're kind of stunting ourselves in growing, I think, by not knowing that everybody sort of goes through something. It's going to look different from whatever you're going through, but that's okay. Just know that everybody is going through something along with you, and helping each other develop along the way through healing, I think, is going to be the path forward for us, just as humanity, as society, as individuals. And so I'm really excited to have this guest on today who um, I really don't even know how to introduce her. She's you're kind of a lot of things, and so different from anybody else that we've had here, which is great. So I love to learn from people who I can't really just put into a box, and that's you. You're definitely outside the box, and so Ingrid, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ty. It's a real honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I just for people to get introduced to you, I know I don't know how you would start. Sometimes I'm like, how do you introduce yourself? Because you've got a lot of different things that you can introduce. Some people like describe themselves as their job or as,
Mm,
they're something they experienced in life or what they're doing right now, or they're a life coach or something like that. But like
yeah, I'm happy to
you're kind of
share. You
all the
want me to?
things. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Yes, my name is Ingrid Hu Dahl. The middle name is a nod to my Taiwanese-Chinese ancestry. I'm mixed Asian. The other half is obviously by the name Ingrid Dahl is Scandinavian and identify as mixed race, identify as queer. I'm an author, speaker, and leadership coach. And I wrote this memoir, Sun Shining on Morning Snow, which Ty, you and I were just talking about, is actually my Chinese given name, which is pronounced Tao Shui Qing. And it means sun shining on the morning snow. And I actually wrote this 4 months after my mother died. So I know we'll get into that, but that's my
Yeah.
introduction for your listeners and watchers.
Awesome. And so this book being a memoir, that specifically talks about specific parts of your life, because that's what memoirs do, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like literally a journey from pre birth to current day. And what's interesting is like the time in our country from when I was born in 1980, it's a stark moment because it's only
Hmm.
13 years after interracial marriage is legalized in this country. And so you enter this love story of my parents in the late 70s, and then alas, I enter the world in 1980. So you kind of go through that lens and the racialized sexism and xenophobia that sort of follows me all along my life, growing up in central New Jersey, with significant moments where I'm growing up in Taipei, Taiwan. So you sort of see like the different experiences of westernization of culture and
Hmm.
how to delicately like kind of try to connect with people, but realizing like the invitation is not really to connect. It's to be informed as to what my otherness is, and the book carries that along. But also it gives me, the author and the person, the real person, right, in the story, this beautiful amplification to choose my spotlight, to live boldly, to have a lot of humility, and to want to connect and relate and heal. Like there's a lot of heal and forgiveness in this book. There's also a lot of generational trauma, and we're looking at like how abuse even like shows up in horses. And I'm a very young kid who grows up working on a horse farm at the age of 5 to ride horses because I love them so much. And I learn a lot about abuse and our ability as humans to choose to be healed. That's a huge difference.
Hmm.
And in the wake of not having that choice, seeing the burden and the harm and the kind of foreverness of animals being stuck in trauma.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And then, I've learned that along the way as well, is where it's like it has to be active, right? You have to make that decision of saying, okay, well, I'm dealing with something, and like, and it's usually because you've suffered the repercussions of some sort of symptom because you haven't dealt with it yet. Either you lashed out, you got triggered, you were angry, you
Mm-hmm.
yelled at somebody you didn't want to, and then you feel awful about it, and like you can either decide to go ahead and fix it, or you just say, well, I'm sorry about that, but then you never really touch it, and it's bound to come back
Mm.
again. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just ignore an issue or it's something you experienced, and I mean, it's formed something in your brain, and you have to address it. So it's really interesting that it even carries through in animals, which I was not aware of whatsoever.
It sure does. And so I love that you brought up triggers. I work a lot with clients, and I've had this experience to work in leadership development and learning across multiple different industries for about 20 some years. So working with adults, adults, it's what's fascinating is we all sort of bring ourselves and our own issues into the workplace, and it's not like you mean to, it just sort of shows up. So those triggers happen all the time. Like you miss each other, there's assumptions, and a lot of that comes from a very specific lens in which how we grew up, how we are listening to like uh, inner chat, which can be quite harmful. Like you have to sort of slow down and really get clear as like what is really happening here. And it requires a lot of self awareness and a desire to connect with somebody vulnerably and ask, is this what you meant? Because, like, gosh, I totally thought it was this. And, it triggered me thinking about how I misunderstood. And usually when I feel misunderstood, I believe this and I act this way. My response and my behavior, my belief is always consistent. So I can interrupt those two things, but you can help me because you could tell me, is that what happened? And even if it's true, yes, I misunderstood you, Ingrid. I don't like you, whatever. I don't think you're a good leader, whatever this kind of like fear based ego stuff happens. So what? So what if I'm not liked? It's okay. I'm still okay. I'm still safe. And I think a
It's
lot of
uncomfortable
adults in
though.
the workplace, yeah, don't feel safe. And
Yeah.
that's a real problem.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. I mean, I feel that. I don't know if everybody feels that, but it's like the imposter syndrome, and then like the people pleasing side, where it's like if somebody
Yeah.
doesn't like me, even though like they can be a vile human being, but I'm like, I can't believe they don't like me. Like that really bothers me. It keeps me up at night. But like, why is that? You have to like
Yeah,
learn how to be okay that not everybody is gonna like you or your personality.
that's right.
Uh, yeah. So going back to, so you were in New Jersey, raised there, half Chinese, half Scandinavian,
Hmm.
and so I've never been to New Jersey, so maybe they're a
Oh,
lot more, maybe they're a lot more open-minded there. But I have, for the majority of my life, lived in the South,
mm,
which has been sort of a really big mix of people. I mean, it doesn't live up to the reputation that it has elsewhere in the world, but it's yeah, it's harder, I would say, for people um who don't look like me, I guess, here in the South. So was it a little bit harder for you growing up there? I know that you only have your experience to go off of, but like, did you experience any, I don't know, bullying or like
oh
being treated
yeah,
differently in New Jersey?
absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting, I think your question is really getting me to consider the different states and like location. And in some ways, New Jersey's so close to New York and Philly, but we're still on the outskirts. We're in a totally different vibe. You're growing up in like public school and it's sort of like cinder blocky, kind of looks like a prison.
Mm.
There's no real like beauty or allure unless you're going to like private school, like closer to Princeton or these other kind of more affluent places. And though my parents met at campus of Rutgers University, and that's where they fell in love, my mom being a graduate student and my dad being an undergrad, New Jersey is just an interesting backdrop for what I think is most people's experiences, regardless of where they grew up. Being mixed race in a predominantly white neighborhood was fascinating because I didn't initially grow up in a predominantly white neighborhood. I grew up in student housing. So it's very like international, there's a lot of people of color. So I remember these really early days of being 3 and 4 and it feeling extremely inclusive and like fun and engaging. And most of my friends were like, black kids. And it was lovely. Like it just was like I was part of the pack. But when we moved into this like kind of, oh gosh, development, I want to call it, right? So like, middle class, middle income, as my parents were getting situated in their careers, I was just kind of struck by being asked, what are you, every day? And where are you from? Like, know where your people from, like, wow. And being like a young kid and adults are asking, it's not like kids are asking, it's adults are asking that. And it's not from a place truly of curiosity. Of a lot of people are like, oh, they're just curious. I'm like, no, curiosity is different, looks different, feels different. That's a, what the hell are you? You tell me right now. I need to know. I need to put you in a box. So it's sort of like this aggressive, subtle bullying from adults, which is completely inappropriate as a kid. And then the young kids, I'd say like the first time I was in kindergarten waiting at a bus stop, or maybe I was in first grade, and a fifth grader at the bus stop who's white, everybody's white, out of nowhere just calls me half piece of shit. And I'm a little kid and I know shit is a bad word, but in the book, I kind of explain this moment and I like describe his facial expressions and really slow down this moment and how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking about and going through, like, gosh, is he the messenger? Does the whole neighborhood feel this way? Are my parents safe? Why me? Am I dressing a certain way for this attention? Why am I being called this? And not that long later on, in the very Asian populated church that we went to for my mother on most Sundays, a teenage boy also calls me half a piece of shit. So this is like both on the white and the Asian side. I was bullied also at the farm. I was locked in a stall and a hose was put on me by a group of girls. So there's bullying all throughout, and it's often around this kind of otherness. All these moments where you don't fit, you don't belong with that white or Asian group, and people wanting it to be very clear that you don't belong. Or scapegoating would happen a lot, blame. Well, Ingrid looks different. It's distracting the men in the congregation. Why is that my fault? That's your problem. Stop looking at me. I'm a kid. And then just realizing that, like, trying to be liberated, trying to run away, trying to feel free, the world is, as a container, not safe for a girl who just wants to have this, like, brave, bold, freeing feeling. Like, it definitely was followed by a car of men in this one story that's captured in the book. And realizing as a teenager, like, wow, the world outside is sort of run and patrolled, literally patrolled by men. And for a girl, that is not safe. And how unfortunate that is to feel the reality and the weight of that, but to also feel kind of like another set of bars, like you're trapped again as this exotic animal, to be seen, to be held captive, to be controlled, to be awed at. It's really creepy, but that is very much part of my experience. And in Taipei, Taiwan, you don't really feel different until people start mentioning constantly that you look different, that you look more Western, and you realize that you're almost like a walking advertisement for double eyelid surgeries, for skin bleaching. And you don't want to be like part of that, but yet that's all people are seeing is, ooh, I want double eyelids like this for a Western person. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, that I can't imagine a lot of that stuff. As you were talking, I was remembering a story of like when I was a teenager, so I grew up in a very, rural town. And I was a very punk pop type of person.
Cool.
And yeah,
Okay.
the spiky bracelets and the
We
big
would have been
Jinko
friends.
jeans. Yeah. Okay, good. Glad to know. Too bad you didn't go to my school because there wasn't very many of me there. And
Mm.
the eyeliner and all that stuff. And I
Ooh.
remember like for some reason I got into going to church because of somebody invited me to go to a church, a Baptist church, right? And so I was like, okay, this isn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. You know what I mean? And like everybody seems
Mm.
so happy and like embracing.
Mm.
And then I went to the local Walmart, and there was like a woman that worked in the jewelry department, and she was one of the congregation there. And like she called me over as soon as I walked in, and she was like, "Hey, come here." And I went over there. She's, "Why do you dress like the devil?" And
Oh.
like then I mean, like I had never been, I don't think, more angry
Whew.
than in that moment right there. But just thinking about that, where it's like that's just something, I chose to put on that day, right? And so they ridicule me, they separate me, they have things to say because it doesn't fit their view, you know what I mean? Like the boxes of like, well, you're not wearing camouflage like all the other kids around here in this little
Hmm.
town, you know what I mean? But like, that's something I could change. I could have put on a camouflage jacket, blah, 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 and all that other stuff, and I would have fit in, right? It's different when you're a completely, like this is what you were born with, like this is you. And to be ridiculed for something that you are just because it doesn't fit a box because they're not used to seeing that either
Right.
side, either Taiwan or New Jersey. Um, it's I don't know what that's like, and I think a lot of people don't know what that's like, and because of that, it's hard to have it's hard to have a natural empathy. I guess you have to like
Mm.
sort of choose to that, where it's like, well, why don't you just dress different? Well, that doesn't solve the problem. And the problem is that people are seeing you as something completely different, and they're afraid of that, and because of that, they're trying to put it into a box. And it's yeah. I mean, I'm explaining your own problem to you, but I'm like for my listeners, for the listeners, just trying to work through this together.
Yeah,
Because
love it.
it is hard to have empathy, for someone else when you don't truly try to put yourself in their position and think about it from all angles. And so, yeah, that's incredible. So you were in New Jersey for most of your childhood, but did you move to Taiwan at some point, or you said you were going back and forth?
It's sporadic, especially as a young kid. I spent like summers while my mom was like, she was in like two different master degree programs, so it was just easier to have me in Taiwan, which was really fun. I felt really like that was a really cool way to grow up. So my first language was Mandarin, which also didn't help. I mean, I love that it was, but in this social construct that I was in with like preschool, and my parents have to give like a piece of paper that translated my Chinglish. It was like Chinese with some English. So they had to be like, this means that, this means this, and the preschool teachers being like, what? Um, it was really interesting having that kind of blueprint, but nobody else seemed to have had that sort of mixing of languages too. So not only did I look different, but I also spoke differently. So that was fascinating. And I like what you were saying too. Just want to go back, like, yes, I would say that readers of my book will absolutely have this opportunity to be in my shoes, which I believe will invite a lot more awareness and empathy. And for somebody, going back, we can't always go back and say, hey, lady at the jewelry counter that you experienced, like, what I would love to have advised this woman who, you know, said such a harmful thing, like that's really hurtful, um, is to like just lead with a lot of curiosity. Like, hey, Ty, I love that you come to the congregation. So exciting to see you. And like, it's awesome. And I'm so curious, like, tell me more about your fashion expression. Tell me more about like your choice to wear eyeliner. Like all I see are people in camouflage. Like, what strikes you about like looking different? I'm curious about that. If people really slowed down and checked in with their anger, because what I would bet is that that person saw your boldness and was somehow subconsciously reminded about how they too had once been bold and were pushed back into a cage and are literally expressing their own anger at not being able to fulfill that. So if you think about that tenfold of all the people who show up really angry, like about gay people, right? That's starting to come up, like God's design for gender and sexuality and all this stuff. And you're like horrified because listen, Sky Daddy is not ever trying to design who we are as people and how we express love or identity. Like that's just like, no one has time for that also to design something around that, which is so heartbreaking because truly what that's saying to me is a bunch of people were not able to live their truth. So how dare anyone else? And that's what we receive is through attack. But it's really like from hurt and a lack of getting the kind of resources and care and expression that you yourself wanted. And that's sad. I hope more people feel that they can still choose, that they can lead with curiosity for themselves and in interacting with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, hopefully we attain that for that would be the goal. That would be, I guess, the utopia, because then we would solve a lot more problems than just that if we get that one basic thing down. Um, which, has ramped up, that over the past, couple of years, but like especially we live in the year of 2025 where a lot of strange things are happening, and it's sort of regressing us. A worldview is going backwards. Um, so I do want to get there, but like, so I'm sure, your experience is that as a kid, um, knowing like what you're talking about the bus stop, and like, is this person just the, the messenger? Are they
Hmm.
just projecting the community's view of what I am or who I am? But this is what I thought, and like, it's sort of like, I thought these people were my neighbors, and
Hmm.
kids I go to school with, and just um, yeah, that's interesting. I'm sure you carried into that. I do want to progress through your story, but I was just reflecting back on that and thinking you're in one position inside of a community when like one voice can make you can like completely dislodge that, to take the ground out from underneath you and make you feel, oh, who am I actually? I'm not in this position I thought I was in. Um, so yeah, and I know you've been in several bands and
Hmm.
things like that. When you were, was it teenage years or is it above?
No, I was in my 20s. Yeah,
Yeah,
most of my
20s.
20s, I was in different bands and touring and had
Yeah.
full-time jobs. So it was fascinating to do all of them. But in your 20s, you have the energy, I suppose.
Did you find more of a, because I like the music community is kind of, it's a different world, especially when you're a musician. And did you find, I guess, more acceptance there than you did in the normal average world?
That's a great question. I'd say more with the queer community when I was coming out, I felt a lot of acceptance and there's like imperfect things, right? There's still this sort of like clicky or box stuff like you got to be butch, you got to be this, you got to be that, are you
Yeah.
femme, are you're like, oh god. But I would say that exposing yourself, I'm choosing that word
Hmm.
very specifically, exposing yourself as a female musician on stage is fascinating. The different kind of reactions you receive from other male musicians and male audience members, whether they're musicians or not. So here's an example of this. I was in a touring band. We played for 33 days all across the nation, right? So I got to experience a lot of these different states in these like little pockets and cities. And I played guitar for that band. So I had a couple pedals, whatever. Some of the things that I was doing on guitar was pretty fun. And I thought it was like an enjoyable experience to be on stage thrashing around and like rocking out. And usually, without fail, somebody would be staring at my setup, usually a guy, and had a lot of opinions that were not, I didn't give a shit about their opinion. I didn't ask for their opinion. I'm tired. I'm malnourished. I'm hungry. I just want to go to bed because we have to get up and drive copious hours the next day. And they want to like really like not bro down. There's a difference between like broing down, like, oh man, you're like interested. You think this is pretty cool. And that would happen. But almost every single show, some dude had to come and like make some comments about my setup or like, oh, are you using that kind of, you're using a line six, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, I don't have the energy to engage with this dipshit. I'm sorry. Like, this is not, no, like I'm not interested. And then people would be like, oh, you're being a bitch. Or they try to follow us in the van. They would try to help us with things like we didn't need help with. And I would say the other male musicians, like half the time, they were just like, oh, yeah, you're a badass chick. Like, do you want to hook up? And I'd be like, no, I definitely don't want to hook up. Like, what are you talking about? I'm a lesbian, A. So that straight out of the gate, not interested. And second of all, we are collectively like colleagues, right? We are transient beings at different cities performing. We're all tired, we're all hungry, all these same things that we share. Let's just like connect on those shared experiences without having to make it messy. It's just really fascinating. It's like you would never see all the things I just described as the initial thing that men go through. Men would be more likely to bro down about gear, not judge it, not see if like they were good enough to be playing guitar with these particular pedals. Like that's really the bar. Like women have to be showing up exemplary. You know, you can't make a mistake or it's, oh yeah, she's a girl, she's playing like a girl. Like whatever that means, you're like playing like a girl is badass. Anyway, that was really exhausting and men don't go through that. Men just don't experience the same thing like that. Maybe they're like, no, Ingrid, we get judgment too. I'm like, yeah, but it's not in the same way where it's like, we get to decide if you're even have a right to be on this stage. Like, I think back to like the Runaways, you know, and there's that really great scene in the film, which I know to be true. I believe this is true, where to like prepare the band to be on stage, like throwing beer bottles and shit at them to get them ready for how the audience is going to react to them being girls on stage. And though we didn't have that same kind of requirement to get ready, you do go through this process where people have like a line of both threat and strange attraction in watching you as a female musician on stage. It's really fascinating, that performance and that psychological dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. You put it very well there at the end, where it's like there's some sort of fascination. It's so strange. It's like for both ways too, because like for us, if we have a great experience doing something, let's say you come in show, you blow it away, like
Yeah,
the crowd was really into it, but
feels so
then
good.
one person comes up at the end and was like, start studying your gear and then like tearing it down. Like, hey, I can help. Like that one bad experience with that can like tamper everything else, and like vice versa for them, which is they even if they don't think that is this the right gear for you, can you really add up to playing to this gear, but then why does it even matter to you? Why is that your fascination? Why is that your focal point? You know what I mean? Go back and enjoy the show. You know what I mean? And like, if you want to talk to the band, whatever, like tell them, hey, I enjoyed it. Um, yeah, I don't know. That's always been really strange to me. The difference between like, especially female vocalists. I mean,
Oh my
you're
God.
right. Because that was like the majority of what I listened to. I listened to way more, female
Mm.
vocalists than I did male. Um, and strangely enough, like I didn't get the same experience you did, of course, but I it was the other way around, where if let's say my friends who were in the car, would always be my female friend that would say something, let's listen to a guy's voice. And they would get so upset that I was like listening to like a lot of female vocalists,
Oh man.
which I still don't to this day don't understand what it is.
Mm.
Yeah. And
It
so
could be also like a reminder about what is so hard to penetrate and so hard to
yeah,
do.
no, it is for sure. But you've built up a really great career in tech specifically. Past that point, you've had a very interesting life. You're like, we're jumping all over the world. We're going to all kinds of different experiences. It's like
Love
we're
it.
talking about different people, but no, they're all Ingrid. Um, so how did you get into tech, first of all, and then what kind of roles did you play in there?
I was in nonprofit and public media, what brought me to San Francisco from New York. So I was in an NGO and consulting and an adjunct professor and guest lecturer in New York. You know, very like easy to kind of piece together when you're a musician, where you have like sort of different, time slots and band practices and tours. And when I came to San Francisco, I kind of had to rebuild my whole community and my whole group of friends and network. And the work I was doing very specifically was like how to help young people and young adults learn tech skills like coding and graphic design and game production, and also music production too, and audio engineering, as a way to express themselves, creating songs, for example, that express themselves and work with a team and get these internships and have access to tech jobs that were like booming in San Francisco. There was such a disconnect from folks who were underprivileged and didn't have access or community. So I started over time building these relationships with especially women in tech, and had like an all-female program and brought these mentors and matched people up. And I had a lot of women come for like career panels to help expose young people to these badass women. Several of these guests would actually like host tours, where a lot of my, young people under our care could go, and we would like actually tour, Zynga and electronic arts, exposure that a lot of young people point blank don't really have access to, but really this was such a huge leap. I'd say like that was the foundation of meeting people who were so curious about my skill set, and we connected with this authenticity and like around giving back and like doing like really important work. And I started building these friendships. And one friend in particular, who I'm still very close with, had this role at Capital One. And we were talking over dinner. It's like, kind of sounds like what you're looking for is somebody who's like to educate, the company around design. And it might be kind of interesting having somebody like me who knows how to do that, even if I'm not the subject matter expert. Like, your subject matter experts have to make it make sense for me to then be able to teach a company. And she was amazingly open and sat with that. And she was the one who really took that and created a role, which I didn't get immediately. I had to interview, but she helped me. She's like, okay, in this dynamic, this is what they're looking for. This is what we do. It was so different. But having that person who's like an advocate, a sponsor, taking all this time to help me understand and translate my skills, to help me understand the visual communication that people are looking for and why, because it's not what we were taught. I wasn't taught that. And in the roles that I had, we would tell the story. You wouldn't show it in a way that's like through a deck, for example. That woman literally opened the door for me. So I got this amazing role at Capital One, loved that experience, and went from design education to like learning and development, which was amazing. What I was able to do with like self-awareness for the design org, which at the time was like 600 people nationally and globally, picked up this opportunity to take on a much larger enterprise, so company-wide role with learning and development. So the centralized team that oversaw the company's learning and development was looking for a DEI learning expert and felt that my skill sets were a good match for that role. I was in the role only for a couple months. It was also amazing, and I got poached by Meta from another friend who I knew in the coaching world. So a lot of my journeys in tech and the roles that I've had come from a learning and development and inclusion, like how do we get people to be better, more vulnerable leaders? Like, you don't go into these leadership roles just suddenly being amazing at it. You don't necessarily know how to be curious about people, their different motivations, their work styles, their communication styles, like how they tick, how to get different people to work well together, how to create an environment and a culture where people feel safe and can thrive. Like, that is an art and a practice. And sometimes you realize some people are actually not interested in management. They're interested in just growing as an individual contributor, and helping people understand the two very different career tracks was part of my role. I really loved all the different kinds of jobs I had, because there were these like big, meaty, complex, but human simple problems all at the same time to solve. And the resistance that people would have to things usually meant they were hungry for it, which was fascinatingly like, wait, what? But once received, once consumed, once adopted and adapted, and especially when you needed to do that at scale, was fascinating to see how culture could shift. So I was in a great position to experiment. I think we could do probably similar things as humans in the world. And that's a bit where my transition takes me. It's like transitioning out of the corporate setting and more into like the world setting. And my book and my leadership coaching is my offer more to this like expansive world, not into the confines of one particular company.
Yeah, that's great points. All and developing, so how a culture can change just from learning about, I guess the differences of other people and being understanding, which is a lot of what we've done here, right? Where you're teaching So when these big companies, it's like, oh God, I'm beating around the bush, but I really shouldn't. So the word DEI, right? So the standing, so that's probably something that YouTube flags and it's probably going to repress the video, even though we, even though we put it up here.
Ah,
But like it's become, it started off as something that was, very very well needed, to like what you were just talking about, getting education, helping understand each other and developing people's skills and focusing on, helping us to work together to lift each other up, to be able to have an even playing field, but also to have new voices because we've repressed those, minds that could come up and help us, to create new things that we've never had before because we've given them a chance to finally do it. But now that's a curse word. You know what I mean? Whenever you say that, or it's like so many of these big companies. I don't. So, in your own personal opinion, like, why do you think that was that there were, you know, big these big companies that had DEI programs? I guess in the first place. I know why they don't now, and I know why a
mm,
lot of them are shutting down. I mean, that's obvious. You know what I mean? There's the federal government that they're just responding to, and they don't want to be sued, and they don't want to be the, interruption in their flow of capitalistic money and all that stuff. But there's that. But like, why do you think that they started those programs in the first place?
I would say most people would tell you it was catalyzed by the murder of George Floyd. The timing, that impetus, the reaction that people had warranted helping people have a space to process and also understand how what was happening in society, you're not suddenly not having that kind of similar kind of potential experience in the culture within a company. And it's so interesting. Like, I actually think that DEI right now getting the slash and burn, and it's a pendulum. I think a lot of these things are a pendulum. The slash and burn or blame of that is actually a really nicely convenient way to slash numbers, to just, I think every company and every industry in many ways is just like leaning their workforce. We're constantly seeing in the past like few years so many rounds of layoffs, like with big companies, small companies. That's just a convenient way to like, okay, we're going to reduce. It's just, okay, great. That's an issue. We'll reduce. And then you lose these programs that are truly monumental in helping people, not just like leaders of color who do need a lot of tremendous support, who have experienced in their entire career tremendous like headwinds. And you want to make sure that you have people who are set up to be able to succeed, who are leaders of color, but you also want to make sure that all the leaders who are not necessarily underprivileged, who have been privileged, are set up to run hundreds of people of teams who are a mix, hopefully, of a lot of different backgrounds and not just looking through a lens of similarity bias or other biases, which we as humans, it's a natural way that our brain is looking for shortcuts. But when shortcuts get interrupted and layered in with like racism and sexism and othering and judgment and assumptions, that's where things get real scary. And if a culture then is only anchored to like, I don't mean to bring bro culture up again, but in some ways it's like what worked for a small group of people, right? Like we love how chaos creates innovation. That does not work for a lot of people. That actually spurs a tremendous amount of anxiety. The amygdala gets super activated and you get less of the frontal lobe. So missing the mark of what kind of culture, environment, how that actually helps inspire people to work better together really does ultimately help the company be innovative and high performing. It's like missing the mark. And I actually fear that with this easy kind of dismissal of DEI and the convenience of leaning your companies, man, is there going to be a lot of company healing and rebuilding in the future? Because things are going to pretty rough, and it already has been. Pre all the reactions and height around DEI, people had experienced tremendous burnout. Like what happened with COVID, you had record numbers of women in the workforce leaving because all of the work fell on them for the most part to handle the home and the kids if that was their experience, right? So you lost a record number of women and people of color already through COVID. And then you're left with tremendous amount of burnout and constant change and like, who's my manager today? Like, that's like people are exhausted from change. And instead of having leaders who are like, change is ever present, we can work through this together and I will guide you. And here's the ways that I'm going to support this team. You have leaders who are really just looking to cut and to push and suddenly aren't seeing the humanity in their talent. And every company who starts losing the plot that talent is their most important asset is really turning the ship towards going off a cliff instead of actually going more into a pool of adventure, innovation, new possibility, the new realm. And it's all fear-based. It's a difficult time, but the slapstick DEI, it's just that.
That was probably the most articulate way I've heard that ever put. So thank you for that
Thanks,
answer.
Ty. That's so kind of you to say.
No, for sure. And like I've heard people try to, and a lot of people get, I guess, very emotional when they start talking about it, and
Mm.
it's it's hard to help. Like, for example, the bro culture. If we're talking about them, if we're talking about the ones that are on Twitter, like you are the embodiment of the boogeyman that they talk about all the time, right? So you're mixed race. You have a wife.
I'm the
Like
boogeyman.
you had a DEI program. Yeah,
That's so
yeah.
funny.
Like you're the person that they always are talk about, and
Mm.
like and then they just start attributing that as a blanket characteristic of all people that are Democrats or whatever, or woke, quote unquote. Um, but it, like you said, like it's so many different things that it's uncomfortable to think of because it doesn't fit the box. It doesn't fit something that they're used to, and I think that's my own personal opinion of like that why a lot of people have like nostalgia for a time that they grew up in, right? Because
Mm.
when they think back in my day, like the good old days, you know what I mean, was always a different time period depending on who you're talking about and how old they are, because they usually refer back to a time when, like, let's see, if you're 80 something years old and you're talking about the good old days was back in the 50s or 60s. um
Mm.
that's not going to
Mm-hmm.
be the same for somebody you talk to in their 40s. It's not going to be the same for you talk to in their 20s or 30s. You know what I mean? So, but like each one of them has a romanticized version of a time because they were comfortable, and like they could put everything in the box. They'd be like, oh yeah, I remember the trends, the music that we were listening to. I
Mm-hmm.
remember the community we were like, and what we could do with the lunch breaks in our high school, um, but that's just where they grew. So that's comfortable. It's not that it was better. It was just comfortable to them, and they're familiar with it.
I like that you put comfortable because it's also around like safe. I felt safe
Yes.
then. I
Mm-hmm.
felt understood. I felt valued. I felt like I was special.
Yeah.
And now, when you're not feeling that way, or you're suddenly scared about your finances, or you're scared about your relevance, or what a lot of people talk about who are older or starting to kind of hit the midlife crisis zone is like legacy. That's brought up a lot. And you're like, wow, that's a tremendous amount of pressure to put
Yeah.
on yourself. What does that even mean to you? I love coaching predominantly like white CEOs. There are these moments. I love coaching everybody, but it's really tough to crack the veneer of a lot of men who are privileged white men who are in these high powered positions. But what's so beautiful and what I love is when you can crack the veneer and get into the space of true vulnerability. People sometimes just want a hug. They sometimes just want to
Mm.
know that they're doing a good job, like a good enough job. Like it's like basic love languages being deprived of them and not knowing how
Mm.
to ask for them because you feel like the veneer, the mask, the ego has to show up in a certain way instead of saying, I just feel like I'm really struggling and would love to know that I'm not always making mistakes. Is there a way like I could have a moment or a day off or like just being a bit more honest? Um, I think more and more people, especially in bro culture, feeling like they have bromances, really genuine relationships with female friends we kind of live in this culture too where sometimes there are these dynamics in our relationships where we get deprived of having friends who, are female or bromances. And, that's a whole other topic. But for me, when I work with my clients, a lot of it is people feeling deeply, deeply alone and just wanting to not be alone. And that's such a human experience. So, as a coach, how I step into that space and support people, I think everybody could really benefit from a coach in their lives. It doesn't have to be around career transition or leadership or executive leadership. It's purely like, I got some stuff to work on and I want it to be proactive in the present and the future. You can have a therapist at the same time and also a coach, but it takes a lot of effort to make bite-sized action items that you can be accountable to that actually help change towards the life that you want and the decisions you want to make to live your one life. You don't have to do that alone.
Can I just clear the rest of my schedule for the rest of the day and just listen to you talk? Because like
Thanks. That's kind.
I'm just like getting lost in what you're saying, and you're so easy to talk to. And you,
Thank you.
the way you present your and so much wisdom. Yeah, it's incredible.
Thanks, Ty.
I will be conscious of your time though, and I'll let you have your day. Um, I know we're approaching on 45 minutes, but like I do want to get to the part of
Mm,
like of course your mother passing, and
yes.
how that
Mm.
affected you and encouraged you to write this memoir. Um, I guess if you don't mind giving us a version of that.
I was inspired to write this memoir 4 months after my mother died of cancer, and it was during that awful COVID years. It was really hard to get to the country. My parents were both living in Taipei, Taiwan, and she never got a chance to write her story. She was a tech pioneer. She had a lot of big dreams and visions for the future. She was also complex. We come from a line of warrior women on my Asian side. And it was amazing to watch her throughout the years be so successful and yet also so broken at the same time. I thought it was important to kind of showcase her and my own identity entwined in how, especially religion, especially the culture clash of me being queer, just like decimated for a while our relationship. And that was really, really painful. But then the beautiful healing and forgiveness and love that evolved our relationship and also transformed her in many ways, even before she died, which was so beautiful to witness. So, my father, who took him just recently to finally read the whole book because he knew it was going to be about my mom's passing. He just was like, I can't read this. I'm like, Dad, you got to read it. And he finally reads it and he sends me this a text after, and he's like, oh my God, it was so uplifting. Like, he's like, I wasn't expecting it to be uplifting. So I hope that readers who are interested in following this journey of my life and my mom and all the things that I experience and how she sort of threads through then the crescendo of her cancer and COVID and quarantine hotel life and all these things that lead up to her death, there is truly a remarkable reminder of so much that we don't know once we lose somebody and their spirit turns back into energy or whatever this beautiful experience that I had continues to be. And I feel like the continuation of seeing that and being part of this next phase of this journey is a great primer to write another book.
So there's another one after this.
There might be.
So this book, I guess, yes, the one right here. I was looking at the poster behind you. It was on the wall. Double up. Um, it's yeah, it's really interesting to, I guess, think about, I guess your mom's life is sort of intertwined with yours, and so the combining the two of like what the experiences is a continuation of like a single story. My father recently passed this year,
Mm.
and he was,
Oh,
he was very abusive, you know what I mean,
mm.
and alcoholic and all of that and stuff. And like I pretty much cut off communication after I graduated high school and moved out,
Mm-hmm.
so, so we were estranged for a long time. And but there is like there's an alternate, whatever timeline out there or whatever, you know what I mean, where like he gave that up or he never,
Mm,
started doing that, which I mean his father was also an alcoholic when I don't know how far back this goes, generational trauma like we're talking about. Um but yeah, just thinking about what you're saying of like regardless of, who your parent is or what relationship is to them, the thought of, what role did you play in their life? What role did they play in yours? And like this is kind of, it's multiple lines coming together. If you look at your ancestry.com, sort of family tree, you're seeing all the different branches of all these people that lived and like you'd never met most of them and they were, decades ago, but knowing that all their stories kind of culminate down into you, and just your experience. That's incredible. How do you manage that? Because I've heard a few of your other interviews where you're talking about, a lot of people praise you because through the way you develop, the you call them characters, but they're people that you actually met in your real
yeah,
life that had
yeah.
like had an influence on you and that you actually engaged with, and how you sort of presented them and developed them and fleshed them out into, living, breathing people that people, even if they didn't know Ingrid, they could pick up your book and read this and be like invested and
Hmm.
have a really good, feel. I don't know, how do you put your experience into a book, I guess is my question.
Oh, through a writing coach. Similarly, what I was advising, not doing leadership alone. I don't think writing a book alone, at least not for me, is ideal. I had a writing coach. She read every single chapter. We worked together for 6 straight months, and the result was so profound because there were these moments where she's like, "Is that character like going to show up? Are they like worth like investing in? So like if they are, let's invest. Is this character? If they're not, let's like take this out." Um, or like, hey, the bigger picture of multiple stories crescendoing still has to have a climax and a release, which are what great stories are made of. So I had to be really thoughtful about how to balance that, especially with my mom's rejection of me and my sexuality, and then the reconciliation. So it was an art and a journey for sure. But the generational trauma and the healing that you're touching upon, I think people have to be very courageous and live boldly and know that they have the power within them to do that and to be just curious and open and forgiving and to look deep within and have the conversations. Like when my mom and I shared that we had the same sort of well, like this sort of an analogy of what it felt like when you were really hurt and you kind of like find yourself in the bottom of this well. Before she died, she's actively dying, and she was like, "Oh my God, that's my well." I'm like, it's always felt really ancient and so big, and I could never figure out why it was like just so overwhelming. Like, how could this small young teenager have suddenly found themselves in the? She's like, "Yeah, that's mine," and I believe it's probably not even hers. It's probably her mom's, and right, and the generational. What we were able to do though in that moment is you push through fear and pain and realize that it's going to take some time, but it's up to me to reclaim this well in this way that is healing, to slowly, not aggressively, not like it's gotta go, gently fill it back up, thank it for what it was trying to do to serve me and my lineage of women, and close it up because it's no longer needed. Like that takes time and a lot of work. And I feel like in some ways, writing this book did that for me, having to relive all these things and piece together in this, like, wow, this is like a physical experience where my mom uh, is also the model to other people that it's possible, no matter what, you could be facing death and transformation and claiming your power and living boldly and honoring your actual heart and your truth is possible. It is never too late to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say that writing this book in itself is a form sort of therapy. You're reliving some of your past, and so and working your way through some things. And personally, I've thought about because people have like, well, you should write your story,
I
but I've
think
thought
so.
about it. But I've thought about it, and I'm like, there's so many different times where even if I'm trying to sit down and do an outline, where I'm like,
Mm,
well, I don't. really want people to know that. Or, you know what I mean? I don't really clearly remember this situation and where it fits in the timeline. Or is that
Mm,
what they really say? And like, you really start dealing with like, am I remembering everything correctly? And also, am I presenting myself the way that I want to? Or are there any repercussions of that? Did you go through any of that while you were,
sure.
writing
Yeah,
your book?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I highly recommend if you're going to write a story, which I hope you do. Stacey Ennis was my writing coach. She's based in Portugal.
Mm.
She's amazing. I had to make some big choices about what trauma I was actually not going to really touch and keep out of the book. I had to make choices of what I felt like was important for me, but also the reader. Um, my family was very receptive. Like some were actually scared, like, oh, are you going to talk about some of this stuff? I'm like, no, I don't think I shed anybody in terrible light, but I make choices to not really give that much emphasis or power to certain characters. So I think it's just one of those things where I'm going to lay my story bare to the degree that mirrors where I'm at. And what a lot of my family members were saying were like, you never take a character, even if it's just somebody being harsh to you, and like chew them up and throw them out. Like you handle them with a lot of like respect and consideration, and you think about what they might be going through, and you invite a lot of this empathy and curiosity. um, I just hope that those choices and those decisions again sort of influence a reader to try that out themselves. Like, how do I consider alternatives? What is really happening for me? What do I need? What might be happening for this person? How can I lead with more curiosity and be less angry? Because fear and anger are funny emotions. We all have that. Anger can be healthy, but usually the root of anger, like the deeper root of the emotion, is pain. And oftentimes it's fear of being even further pained. And so anger is like the reaction, right? And so if that's what we're experiencing, how do we slow it down and invite people to like not jolt into anger or like express fear and suddenly do a bunch of stuff in their beautiful minds, but sit and feel safe enough to untether. Why are these reactions happening for me? What are these triggers? Where are they coming from? What have I been hearing myself say that actually might not be healthy for me? Like, how do I let that go? Like, what do I need to do? I just think that people, hopefully, reading this and being in my shoes and never chewing somebody out, no matter what bullying experience I had, will help people realize that that's not necessarily the choice. The choice is to evolve. The choice is to forgive. The choice is to have humility and care, um, and hopefully to grow. And no one can grow if they don't push through their discomfort and go through fear. And it takes a lot of bravery, but we all have it in us.
Yes. In a way, you just answered my final question for you, which is always ask guests, using your experience, what is a long-term solution for people? I guess, in particular, I would say for you, where it's like your situation where you grew up in a place
Mm,
to where like you're criticized or, bullied for, just who you are, and being mixed race or, coming out, you have several times in your life where that happened. What is, I guess, in my mind's eye, like I think of like
mm,
I think that all comes from a very similar place of what you're just talking about, where it is fear and then anger, which is coming from pain and the fear of feeling that pain again, or even stronger, because of something that you don't understand. I know we've that several times throughout
mm,
this episode today. What is a long term solution for somebody that is going through that situation where they are being ridiculed by, other people for not being the same?
hmm. It's a great question.
Obviously, you've made it this far in life. You've done pretty well for yourself.
I think it's really important not to use that to beat yourself up. So choosing to reject self harm and invite self awareness and empathy, which is really hard. And, you know, sometimes it's going back to the people who are like, go back to the lady at the jewelry counter and be like, you know, that interaction really hurt my feelings. Like, was there a question that you actually had that you wanted to ask me? Because, like, I'm here. I'm willing to answer it, but I just want you to know, like, that stung. Do you want to know why it stung? Like, I could share that with you if you're interested. It's like the invitation to do something where it challenges what we just then assume. Because then what happens is we welcome the seed of belief and it can grow. It can get real big and scary. And it's like, okay, well, hold on. Let's not do that yet. Let's go and ask somebody, like, what's up? Or, like, hey, you know, yesterday you seemed really upset and then you bullied me, and the look on your face made it seem like something was happening for you. Like, what's up? Like, honestly, like, you can confront people, you can say these things, and somebody could be like, you know, react in their way. But I bet you, if you kind of touch something that is true for them, it's quite powerful because we're humans and we're a social being. We need the connection. So the moment that somebody tries to be dissuasive or push or reject, usually there's something there that they're crying for. They're crying for help. They're crying for attention. They're crying for a need that's just never been met, never been considered, right? Or even being misunderstood. Everybody can relate to be feeling pain and some aspects of being misunderstood. So when we tap into that, it's like, you know, every time you ask me these questions about what am I feel incredibly misunderstood. What's coming up for you? Like, when do you feel misunderstood? It's, and like, you don't have the energy or the time always to do that. But in the moments where you decide to, like, lean into it, slow down, you don't have to be in a rush. Because I think everything that's like, we are in this fast, urgent rush pace for every single thing we do in our lives and our careers and everything allows for the complete disconnection that we could have in the connection with others. So the system and the way that this culture is in general is not natural to how humans are meant to connect and socially relate. So a lot of this also is not accepting this norm because it is not. It is not norm, it is constructed. We can't just assume that because it's our experience and we benefit from it, it's normal.
Right. Or natural.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Thank you so much
Well
for that,
said.
Ingrid.
Thank
Yeah.
you,
No, well
Ty.
said. I said one word after you said all these
I was like,
amazing
yeah,
words strung
natural.
together.
Yeah. People
Yeah,
love
yeah.
using
Yeah.
naturals that, yeah. Oh,
Yeah, Ingrid, thank you so much again for sharing your time and to talk about your story. And I think people that hear this and what you went through, I know it's helped me. Like I love going through these sessions with incredible speakers like yourself because like this is my therapy session. I'm talking to you and like you're speaking. You've told me things today that I'm gonna have to think about for weeks and try to implement in my life. So I
thanks,
really
Ty.
appreciate that. No, for sure. Thank
Well, I
you.
love that we'd be friends if we were back in like the high school
Yes,
age. So just
I
know,
know.
you let me know because I'd love to connect
Okay.
with you more.
Yeah, for sure. Your book officially launches tomorrow,
It does.
as of this recording. Sun shining on morning snow. And where can people get that?
On any book distribution platform, Amazon, Porchlight, Barnes and Noble. You can also listen to it. So that's coming up in July. And you can read it digitally. So Kindle, a few of the other platforms that you can are now accessible. You can go to sunshiningonmorningsnow.com/buy to see what I mean. And I update my website basically daily. So reviews, articles, publications, podcasts like this, you can access.
Incredible. So are you reading the book on the audio book form?
I did. This morning I just
Yeah?
finished like the final chapter and like double
Wow.
checking all the pickup takes. Yeah, I had a coach, another coach, a vocal coach who helped me through that, and I recorded with Twin Flame Studios. So excited for that to come out on Audible in July.
In July. Awesome. And we'll put the links in the show notes. And That's incredible. Ingrid, it was so good meeting you, and I will definitely keep up and get a copy of your book as well.
You too, Ty.
Be going through that. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. And thank you for listening. If you are on the audio podcast platforms, you can find this in the video form on YouTube and vice versa. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find us on all the major audio podcast platforms. So hard to pop all those P's. There's the iHeart, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music. The list goes on and on and on. They keep adding more platforms, and we just keep getting on them. If you heard Ingrid talk about something today where you're like, you know what, I know somebody that would really benefit from hearing the message that she said today. Something she said today was very, very impactful, and I need these other people to learn to listen and to know this information that Ingrid was talking about. Maybe they'd just be interested in reading her story and her book. Share this episode. That is the quickest way to help us grow, of course, this show, but it also gets the message out to the people that need to hear it. When we share the information directly with somebody, they're more likely to click on it, to listen to it, and to absorb that and then take action. And that's the point. And so, thank you for listening to this episode, and we will see you in the next one.